hold it, if you hold the mic kind of in this general area, it should be pretty good. You don't have to eat it. I mean, you can put it up here too, but I think if you really need to see your slides. Yeah. All right. Kyle, just let me know when you're ready to go. Oh, ready to go. All right, let's get started. Welcome. We're excited to be here. I'm Kevin Torgerson in the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, and we've got a group of panelists up here from our office and community and the county that we hope will bring to you information that will help. It could be a little startling at times, a little disturbing, but we're not trying to make it that way. We don't want people to be paranoid. We don't want people to be in fear of what's out there. We want you to be educated. That's what this is all about. Community awareness for anybody, especially when it comes to kids. That's why we do this. We talked about this at the DARE graduation a few weeks ago here, hoping that we would have a lot of folks here. We are streaming it so that the parents in Stewartville School District have an opportunity to view it if they're home with their kids and, you know, wrangling them in the way that they probably need to do. We're good with that. So hopefully they're catching some of those folks there too. And those of you that are here, if you have people, and in fact, I want to say this now so I don't forget it later if I do, but please, the paperwork, the handouts that are up there on the table as you leave, please take more. If you think you have some friends or others that should be here, others in your friend group, parent friend group, or whatever, please take it with you. And the one thing I should mention, on one of the new updates, since we did this before, last time we did this here in Stewartville was before COVID, but down in the lower left-hand corner of this handout, which is tonight's agenda, there is a QR code, and the QR code takes you right to the PowerPoint, and you'll have access to that, so you can use that today or tomorrow and whenever, and do what you wish with it at that point to help remind yourself of what you heard here tonight and will hear tonight. There is one change in the program that's a little bit, it's not a change in content, it's just who the speakers are. So if you have that agenda in front of you, Detective Dan Johnson and Deputy Jason Horn are switched. Jason's going to go first, and then Deputy Dan Johnson will follow that. So there's a lot out there right now for parents and kids, and the topics we're going to talk about tonight really are, as I said, it's a really, more than anything, it's a parenting one-on-one type of session. It's an idea that we've been kicking around and have been kicking around, something that way back in my DARE days, I was a DARE instructor for 12 years, and we used to have a thing called family night, or parent night actually, and we basically did this very similar presentation. We didn't have all of the types of presenters we have here tonight, but basically we did cover a lot of it, and the DARE officer basically did the whole show in that sense. And as DARE evolved, it has evolved to continue to grow with what our communities and what our world is about. One of the things that got changed out of that was the parent nights were dropped or not a requirement of the program. And so, again, I just felt that it was something we needed to do and continue doing. So in our 3 schools that we do have impact in, our Stewartville school here, and Byron and Dover and Yoda schools, that's what we will do. We're going to try to, again, secure more dates and do the same thing in those places. So again, those people that maybe you thought would be here or should be here, there will be more opportunities. And we know that during the school year, we are up against all kinds of things. You saw as you came in, I'm guessing you saw, I saw the boys basketball team leaving. I don't know who's in there now, but it's just the schools are very, very busy. So we thank the Stewartville School District for allowing us to come here We don't teach DARE in our schools. We don't force ourselves on them. It's a partnership, and they have to want us here, and we're always very happy that we can continue doing that. So there's a lot of things that I would like to say more about, and I think what we'll do is we'll just get into the agenda, and then when we get to the question and answer period at the end, and that's where hopefully you have a pen. The back of the agenda is blank, so if you have questions, there's two ways to go about it. If you have a really burning question that needs to be answered at the moment, try to holler it out, but at the end, we'll have all the panelists move right up here in the front of the stage. They will have a microphone. I'll play, I don't know, some people might know this or not, but I'll play Phil Donahue, if you know who that is, and I'll run around and if you have a question, we'll get you the mic so that not only can the panelists hear you, but everybody can. And then, as I mentioned, we are streaming it, so we do want to have it loud enough so that those microphones can pick it up, and the streaming audience can also take part of that. So with that, I'm going to get right into it with our DARE officer here in Stewartville, Deputy Courtney Amos.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I am DARE officer, Deputy Courtney Amos. This is my first year doing DARE. And we just completed, I think we graduated 261 students this year, so it was a great first year for me. I had a lot of fun with it. Sorry. I'm an anxiety talker. I'll calm down, I promise.
I didn't advance any slides.
No, I got it.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to talk about our DARE curriculum, also our Keep It Real. So Keep It Real. So our curriculum is designed based on a socio-emotional learning theory, so SEL. SEL identifies fundamental basic skills and developmental processes needed for healthy development, including self-awareness and management, responsible decision-making, understanding others, relationship and communication skills, handling responsibilities and challenges. So SEL theory teaches youth to control their impulses and think about risks and consequences, resulting in more responsible choices. So real life situations that students will encounter from kids, through kids, to kids, narrative approach. So the kids actually have a ton of interaction throughout our DARE courses. Alrighty, so we have 10 core lessons that are arranged in a scaffolding process, starting with the basics about responsibility and then decision making, and then building on each other, allowing students to develop their own responses to real life situations. So other than the 10 core lessons that we actually teach, we actually add on an 11th lesson, which isn't really like a lesson. We do a DARE role model day, so I'm actually here for 11 classes with the students. So me and then the teachers that I work with, the health teachers, we pick out seniors, awesome seniors who have been making safe and responsible decisions, and they come in on the 11th day, and the kids are actually able to ask them, I say, comment any questions you have about what it's like being a senior, if they have any questions about bullying, making safe, responsible decisions, how to deal with when people ask you peer pressure questions, alcohol, tobacco, anything like that. So they're able to see it, not from just us adults, you're old, they can actually talk to someone that they look up to that's closer to their age. Not that I'm too far off, I'd like to think, but. So we have a new theme of making safe and responsible choices. Did anybody here take DARE in their school? Okay, a few. So it's probably changed a lot since then, probably a ton. I feel like back then, when the sheriff used to teach it, it was more very based off drugs, and alcohol. Now we only have one lesson that we actually really talk about tobacco and alcohol, and it's more about the kids making just good choices and how to be a good person essentially and think for themselves, is this a good idea? So that's more what it's about. So we use the DARE decision-making model to apply to real situations. So we'll go over that in this next slide, kind of what I was just talking about for making those responsible choices. So we also help students learn how to communicate more effectively and develop stronger relationships with peers, family, and authoritative figures. So this is our DARE decision-making model. So it's define, assess, respond, and evaluate. And I always tell the kids, this is something that they do subconsciously anyway, but I say we like to bring it to light, that way they can actually, you know, think about their decisions before just being like, yes, I'm gonna do it. So define, they have to figure out what the problem is, right? So I say, what's your problem, okay? Assess, what are all the choices you have, all of them, negative and positive. What are all of your choices that you have? Respond, what choice are you gonna make? Not only what choice are you gonna make, what's the most responsible choice? What's gonna make you go further in life? What's the most responsible thing that's gonna be healthy as well? And then evaluate, did you make the right choice? Did you make the responsible choice? So the National Common Core Standards for DARE's new Keep It Real curriculum is aligned with the National Common Core Standards to provide a framework of core instruction in today's classrooms. The 10 lessons are aligned with the National Core 5th grade standards, since 5th grade students are the usual grade for level of introduction of DARE curricula. Standards are noted on that website, corestandards.org. So the 5th grade and 6th grade curriculum is the same curriculum. It's just, we can introduce it in 5th grade as well, so it's just the same that we teach our 6th graders. So the curriculum meets multiple national core standards in the area of reading, so literature, information, text, informational text, foundation skills, writing, speaking, and listening. So in conclusion, it is important to remember that DARE is not an automatic fix-all. It's not, I would love for the kids to come in and be like, yes, I will never drink and never smoke and never use drugs and always be responsible and healthy my entire life because I took this one class. It's not that simple. We like to use the example of driver's education, right? You can go to driver's education, they show you all the scary videos of car crashes and what can happen, you know, but people still speed and things like that. You know, they still drive recklessly, they still get DUIs, things like that. So we just have to keep in mind that this is information for them to use and hopefully get information out of so they can keep them back in the brain as they get older. So it also involves a partnership with parents, teachers, and law enforcement to help students progress into safe and responsible citizens. I think that's all I have. All right. Detective Johnson?
Sure.
Pass it on to you.
All right, I'm Detective Dan Johnson. I work in the Sheriff's Office. I do investigations as well as working in the digital forensics lab. So what that means is I work with computers, cell phones, drones, cameras. If it's got a board and we need evidence off of it, it comes to my desk. So I'm here to talk about internet safety. It's my favorite slide ever. I'm just going to let you guys read it for a second. That's parenting right there. So let's talk about that. What do your children do online? All right, so we go online for a number of reasons, right? Half of their classes are, 90% of their classes are online. They talk, they text, social media, check the score for the game, entertainment for YouTube, Netflix, all that jazz is online, right? Gaming systems are all online right now. Computer gaming, Xbox, PlayStation, all that stuff has an online connection, right? So they do a lot of stuff online. A lot of our life is online. So we got to talk about some safety issues. What else is online? We have inappropriate content. Online privacy concerns, sexting is a concern. Online sexual solicitation, and cyberbullying are some of those things we worry about as parents. Kind of pick through those a little bit. First of all, how do they go online? How many people in here, their kids have a cell phone, smartphone? Okay. When I say smartphone, of course, I mean iPhone, Galaxy, one of those, where you can get online. So that's one, right? How many of your kids have school computers? Every single one of you, right? Those are online. Those, I think they're HP Stream books right now. There's almost no storage on those things. Everything that they do, kids are reaching out online. Friends computers, laptops, tablets. We talked about cell phones. MP3 players, if they're not using their phone. iPod Touch. We're going back a little bit, but that's got internet connection as well. PlayStation, the Nintendo Switch, all of those have active internet connections. They all have chat features that come with them. Some of them have chat features you can download. Internet browsers are on the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, X, S. All those have an internet browser built in. Kids use apps like Discord and which the chat app we'll talk about in a minute. So all that stuff goes out. There's chat features. Even the games themselves have online chats. They wear them stupid headsets so that they can talk to their teammates, right? So all of those things are going out online. Technology can't catch everything, so communicate. The most important thing I'm going to say is talk to your kids. Okay? You have to know what they're into, what they're on, what they're doing. Every single app that has some way to communicate with other players, other users, other people, has the potential to be abused, right? By people that have nefarious intentions. There's filters that catch a lot of stuff. They don't catch everything because there's something new every 10 minutes, right? So what are we going to talk to our kids about? With our younger children, I suggest you talk to people about etiquette. Etiquette is how you behave online. Being a bully, swearing at people, that stuff will get you banned from apps. And it's not the way you behave, right? Looking at inappropriate content. You're going to define what inappropriate content is for your child. For a young child, most of YouTube isn't even that appropriate, right? For an older child who's trying to learn how to change oil for the first time, not a bad time to watch a video. So what's appropriate changes by the age group. If you're not talking to your kids, they don't know what you think is appropriate, and they're going to find what they're going to find. Talk to them about pop-ups and passwords. Pop-ups aren't quite as big a deal as they were back in the day, but we're talking about those prompts that pop up and say, come here. You click on it and off you go to God knows where. Now it's more advertisements in the games. All those games are free so they can advertise all kinds of stuff. Talk to them about not trusting everyone they meet. Stranger danger is an easy concept when you're talking about a person, but how about online? You've been playing a game with somebody for hours, you kind of feel like you trust them, you still don't tell them where you live. You certainly don't share your password, your birthday, those sort of things, right? So now we move on to our teens and our tweens. Cyberbullying, sexting, posting personal information, and meeting offline. Back in the day, they used to tell you, never get in a car with a stranger. Now we use our phones to call a stranger to give us a ride, right? A little bit of a turn. Cyberbullying, when I taught there, which has been a couple of years now, I always told kids, if you're not willing to say it in the middle of a crowded gym with your parents and the students, don't post it online. Okay? Sexting is absolutely a thing. And it's more of a thing than people would probably like to think about. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's right around a third of high schoolers that were surveyed admitted to receiving sexts. Only about 17% admitted to sending them. Tells me about 15% are lying. Okay? So you need to talk to your teen about what's appropriate. We'll kind of hit some of these a little bit more. So what can you do? Talk to your kids. Establish rules. When it comes down to it, that's your phone. You're the parent. It's your phone. You own it. You pay for the plan. It's yours. It's not theirs. So if they're going to use it, they need to understand what the rules are and what your expectations are. If you don't tell them what your expectations are, they have no idea what it is. So talk to your kids. Remind children that anything they send can easily be forwarded. Okay? When you're madly, deeply in love with a 14-year-old child and you send a picture of inappropriate things to the person you're madly, deeply in love with, it's great. It doesn't go anywhere. Anybody here married to who they were dating as a 14-year-old? Not me. So what are they gonna do with that after you break up, after you fight? Think about that. Have them think about that. When shopping for a cell phone, research security settings. Okay. Some kids are great with devices. They understand, they get it. They're not sharing their stuff online. They're keeping their bits and pieces to themselves. Awesome. If you have a kid that you're worried about, maybe consider some monitoring software. Verizon's big in this area. They have something built into their plans. If you research online, literally just Google monitoring children cell phone, and you'll find a ton of different apps. Bark, I think, is one. There's a bunch. So if you've got a kid that you got to worry about a little bit more, maybe consider that. There we go. So what are some of these apps? We got social media apps, websites. These change daily, but there are some core ones. How many people are on Facebook? That's why your kids aren't. Instagram, Twitter are, kind of your standard. Snapchat. There's a bunch more though. There's a new one every day. Everybody's trying to cash in on social media stuff, so there's a new one every day. Discord, new to the slide. When Discord came out, it was designed to keep people that played multiplayer games together in groups outside of the game. So it was a chat app, it was a messaging app. You could talk over it, you could share files if you really wanted to. And there's message boards, all kinds of stuff. So if everybody was in the same kind of game, you had a group that you like to play with, you put a Discord together, you talk on that. Well, what did I just tell you? You can talk on it, you can share files, there's message boards, okay? So a lot of my recent cases have included Discord. I had a person recently that had their cell phone taken away, their school computer taken away, and they were still managing to talk to somebody using Discord on their Xbox. Either way. So this is an ever-evolving list. If you don't recognize what it is on your kid's phone, check the App Store. There's a description of it right on there. How about photo sharing? We got Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, Kit, WhatsApp, Google Hangouts, Skype, WhatsApp. I think it said. There's a bunch. There's a pile of them. There's a ton of messengers out there. Almost all of those messengers have some sort of file sharing, photos, videos, other files. You just kind of got to research and know what these are. Apps of concern. On top of all of those, we do have some that are more specifically designed for hiding things for parents. There's calculator apps, Calculator Plus, Audio Manager, Vulti. All of those are applications that are designed to look like one thing and hide something else. So Calculator Plus is the one I play with because, of course, I've got to go check into this stuff, right? So if you hit Calculator Plus, it looks just like the Calculator app on an Android. I'm not sure what the iPhone looks like, but I think they're pretty similar. If you type in the same number, the right numbers, and the plus, it opens a photo vault. Inside that photo vault is whatever you decide to stick there. I'm sure it's all pictures of puppies, but if you're trying to hide something from somebody, and they've got two calculator apps, you might want to check on both of them. Other notable apps and websites. Reddit is messaging board, basically. Reddit's got everything from celebrity news to advice to, the depths of the internet. Musically, not quite as big as a deal in it. Again, some of these kind of rise and fall as we go. Omegle's one I like to talk about, and there's another one I just saw the other day that's just like it. But, Omegle, their tagline is "Talk to strangers." Chat roulette's another one. It's very similar. So what it does is you jump on this website, and it'll direct you towards a random stranger, and you start talking. as you click through, some people are doing funny stuff, some people are out there just talking, some people are disturbing, okay? Omegle is one where you can meet people in areas of interest as well. They have kind of chat rooms so strangers into puppies, strangers into whatever. So if you're looking for something, you go in there, look for a chat room, and then again, strangers with similar interests. So what are the risks? We have risks of sharing or oversharing, right? Personal information is important. To open a credit card in somebody's name, you need their name. You don't have to get the address right. You don't have to be that close on spelling the name. Social security number is handy. Date of birth is even handier. But you don't need much. Passwords are a big one. Every time your kid logs into Fortnite, there's a scroll along the bottom that says Fortnite or will not ask for passwords. Do not share your passwords. Hacking, online enticement. You know, if you give somebody your password, it's not surprising when all of your accounts change, right? Online enticement, solicitation. There's a lot of things we can be looking for on there. People trying to extort money. Sextortion was just in the news recently. What is sextortion? Usually sextortion looks like this. Hey, you're kind of cute, let's talk. They talk to them. Hey, can you send me a nude? Sure, why not? Okay, I'm gonna need $50 or I'm gonna share your nudes with your entire friends list. That's extortion in 8 seconds. Okay? Usually people are targeting males on social media because we're dumb. And that's it. So in the space of 30 minutes, your kid has gone from, hey, somebody new, to, oh crap. And it's a problem. I've always told my kids, if you don't know them in real life, don't have them as friends. And I know that's not a realistic approach, but that is my goal. If you can't put a face to a name and a house to a face, you run the risk of running, some of these are really elaborate. I had one a couple years ago where this guy was talking to somebody, this kid, and they put on a cam show for him. And it looked like they were talking to him, it looked like they were sharing news back and forth. And as you watched it, they would only talk as they typed. Okay, you would see something type, and this cute girl was typing, and that's when messages would come through. Come to find out, that was a 50-year-old guy living in Canada that was talking to this kid. But he had timed that video and would only talk during it. But you would see things that are off, like he didn't quite talk right because he was actually an Indian guy living in Canada. So if you look at something that's weird, they're using words that people around here wouldn't use. That's a clue. Okay? Anything that looks off is probably off. What can you do? Establish rules about what they share. Okay? We have screen names for a reason, use those. Never share where you live, which date of birth is, home phone number, home address, all that, right? Learn about reporting options. Most of those have a report content button. At the end of this slide, or at the end of my portion of the presentation, and in the back, there's a bunch of places you can report stuff. NetNet is one of them, so look for that on there. Help them with their privacy settings. Okay? Snapchat maps should not be on public. Literally follow somebody through town on that. Help them create a strong password to talk about friends lists. That's what I was talking about, right? If you don't know them, you might know I am. Nope, there's my stat, or my statistic. 27%. So why are they sexting? Some are funny, some are bored, some want to impress somebody. Peer pressure. There is nobody more persuasive than a 6-year-old boy trying to get a dude. Okay? They're going to keep asking. They're experimenting, they're learning relationships, sexual behaviors, and boundaries. Okay? Everybody has to have their own boundaries. consequences of sexting we talked about. Sometimes these end up in schools going around too, so sometimes there can be some discipline with that. Once again, talk to your kids. Online solicitation looks really similar. Any of those apps we talked about, it's just what they're asking for. I had one a couple years back. The guy was in chat rooms on Facebook for teens with depression, and he was pretending to be a counselor. So he would talk about being a counselor. Hey, you're great. You seem nice. Hey, I don't normally do this, but, and then we would go down the solicitation path. So you need to talk to your kids about where their line is and not cross it. It's not, oh, he seems nice. It's, hey, this seems off. Okay? And those bells and whistles are going off in the back of your head. There's a reason for it. Grooming is all about exploiting natural curiosity. Hey, I'll show you this, and then this gets a little deeper every time. It's exactly the same as solicitation, again, just a little different twist. Signs of grooming. If your kid's getting gifts from strangers they've never met, that's a huge red flag, right? There's something calling in on numbers, you see numbers popping up on your bill from area codes you've never heard of before. They start rejecting family and friends. That's a big thing with grooming. Ooh, your parents don't understand yet. Let's not talk to them, you just talk to me. Getting upset when they're not online, more than normal. And every time you come around, that screen goes black or gets twisted over or whatever. That's cool. Kids are capable. If you talk to them and they have their boundaries, they're going to do the right thing. I've seen that exact thread way more than once. Reading through chats on cases at work. A lot of them are like, you, your girls, bank block me. I don't need any part of this. So if you talk to them and they're smart, they'll do the right thing. You can learn the lingo. These are just some quick ones. If your kid's talking about meet IRL, they want to meet somebody for realsies. Okay, that's a big one. These are the reference sites I was talking about, and they are in the handouts in the back. MissingKids.com, they have NetSmarts and NetSmarts 411. FamilyEducation.com, NetLingo is where you can see a lot of those. What word did my kid just say? NetLingo is a good one. Urban Dictionary, also a good one. And then NACMAC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I don't have on there, and I should. That's where you get tips for, or that's where we get tips from for internet crimes against children. Next, we are going to bring up investigator Joel Johnson for some drug trends.
Good evening. I'm Investigator Joel Johnson with Sheriff's Office. I'm assigned to the local drug task force. Today we're going to go over some drug trends, things that we are seeing here locally here in Olmsted County and all across Minnesota and the country for the most part. There are community issues, teenage alcohol and chemical use. Alcohol itself, the numbers are remaining pretty steady as far as drinking and driving goes, things like that. However, we're seeing an increase in cases involving marijuana use and prescription medications. The marijuana one is becoming bigger and bigger as it gets, unfortunately, closer and closer to legality. It's becoming easier and easier to get, it seems. So some of the types of drugs that we are seeing on the bigger end of things, there's methamphetamine. That's going to be our biggest. We're seeing a ton of that all over southeast Minnesota, all over the state, all over the country. Marijuana, the marijuana derivatives such as the wax, oils, and edibles. Heroin. Fentanyl has unfortunately made a huge presence as of late. Fentanyl is being found in pretty much everything from our cocaine to meth to our heroin to just pure fentanyl, even our prescription pills now. Our prescription drugs, we'll talk a bit more about. Cocaine. Cocaine has made a comeback locally. I don't know if it's economy driven or what it is, but it is coming around. Ecstasy, the club drugs, we don't see as much around here. That's more of the big cities. LSD and acid, it's kind of a niche group as well, so we're seeing it a little bit, but not a ton. And then the psilocybin mushrooms, we are stumbling upon grows of mushrooms. We actually just did a search warrant the other day where we seized 3.5 pounds of psilocybin mushrooms out of a residence. First, talk about methamphetamine a little bit. This is kind of the different pictures of what it can look like. It comes in several different forms. Across the top is more of a powder form. That is more of the old school meth that you were seeing that was locally cooked. In about 2009, pseudoephedrine was put behind the counters. It was limited on how much you could purchase. So the production of methamphetamine pretty much dropped off and is almost unheard of locally anymore, which is a great thing. However, other people saw this as an opportunity to step in. So now we have crystal meth, which is the stuff on the bottom, looks more like, they call it ice, crystals, like shards of ice or crystals. That's being brought up mainly out of Mexico, and it's being brought up literally by the truckload. In 2019, this is a siege from 2019 of 50 pounds of meth was found in the gas tank of a pickup truck that was coming up out of Arizona. I'd like to say this is the biggest bust we've had in Olmsted County, but unfortunately it's not. We have busts of 75 pounds. We've had just this year in Olmsted County alone, we see 201 pounds of methamphetamine. So like I said, it is coming up in insane numbers. If you think about this, an average user probably buys 3.5 grams, which is an 8-ball in drug terms, to use or as a user amount, and probably don't use that over the course of a day or two. Well, there's 454 grams in a pound, 50 pounds here. We're looking at over 6,000 dosages, I guess you could say, of user amounts just in this one bust that we did. And these are happening daily across the country. Next, look at heroin. Heroin comes in several different forms as well. We got black tar heroin, brown powder heroin, the white, and then we get some gray stuff. We see a lot of different colors, and all that depends on what it's cut with. The black tar is not very common around here. It's more out on the coast, and it's a lot more powders. The colors vary. You can see purple, white, pink, all sorts of stuff. Like I said, it all depends on what it's cut with. Speaking of the cutting agents, cutting stuff, this here is an example of our street pharmacists at their best. They're cutting their stuff to try to make their profits higher. They get a little bit of heroin, they have a lot of cut, they then sell it to people, and it inflates their profit margin. So they're cutting with things like Rizzy. We're not seeing it locally here, thank God, but around the country, there's Rizzy that uses a cutting agent in heroin. It's like a dye for flowers or something like that. And people are injecting this, and it starts to eat away at their skin. So this might not be local, but what it comes down to is this is happening. There's cutting agents of all sorts that are being put into these things, and these people have no idea what it is they're putting into them. They're not pharmacists, they're not scientists, they have no perfect method. They're putting stuff into a blender, they hit run, they take out and they put it into their bags. You have no idea what's coming into this stuff. So that leads us into fentanyl. Fentanyl is started off being put into heroin. It's much stronger. As you can see here, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that's 100 times stronger than morphine and up to 50 times stronger than heroin. The picture here depicts just how much fentanyl it takes to be lethal. It's a very minimal amount. Heroin, it's also a little amount, but in terms of what fentanyl is, it's crazy. So it started out that fentanyl was being mixed into heroin because they're making it stronger, making it more addictive. They say the best high for a heroin user is an overdose high. The closer you can get to that overdose, the better the feeling is. So they're always trying to get to that next high. And when they get to that high, they always want to get back to it. So the people that are bringing this heroin up, they started adding fentanyl to it because it started making that high stronger and stronger and stronger. And people wanted it more and more and more, and then it just increased. Well, now we switch to, well, the fentanyl is synthetic, we can make it, we can do things like that, we can get it cheaper. So now we switch to basically we're just seeing pure fentanyl. When people tell us we're buying heroin, I would say 90% of the time we're buying fentanyl. We're not seeing a lot of heroin around here lately, it's straight fentanyl. In 2022, Olmsted County sees 75 pounds of powder fentanyl. So if you think about 75 pounds, you look at that far left vial, you think about how much it takes and how many people could be killed from that 75 pounds. And that's just here in Olmsted County. Now, let's move that across this entire country. And the statistics match this. Here in Minnesota alone, opioid-involved overdose deaths among Minnesotans have increased 44% from 2020 to 2021, and the number of deaths has more than doubled since 2019. These numbers, I don't know how accurate they are, because I know there's a lot of different things that go into it. As law enforcement, we don't get all the numbers given to us. If somebody's brought into a hospital and left in a hospital by a dealer, a friend, whoever it is, and that person passes away of a drug overdose, we don't get notified. So there are some numbers that we don't see in Olmsted County. Now, with these numbers, these are just the deaths. We're not seeing the number of overdoses that are saved. Every day, people are overdosing, and they're saving themselves, they're giving away naloxone, Narcan, all that stuff, and they're saving themselves or their buddies, or else law enforcement's arriving on scene and saving them once they're called. So the number of deaths would be through the roof if it wasn't for these other opiate blockers. Keeping along the fentanyl lines, counterfeit oxycodone is another huge problem that we've run into in the last couple of years. If you look on the left, you got an authentic 30 milligram oxycodone pill. You look on the right, you got a fake one. Very hard to tell the difference. People think that they're buying the real stuff. I will tell you that 99% of the time they're getting the fake stuff. And at this point, people are just looking for the fake stuff because they know it's fentanyl. In 2022 alone, Olmsted County sees 40,000 of these pills. Now, the lab results show that were recently done that 6 out of 10 of these pills contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. Now, it's obviously all dependent on your tolerance, things like that, but with numbers like that, just think how many 40,000 pills, how many people can be killed by that. Now, these pills are everywhere. They can be escaped with the prescription pills, things like that. But we'll go a little deeper into the prescription stuff here shortly. So I spoke about the Narcan a little bit. All of our deputies, our first responders, everybody here in Olmsted County is all familiar with Narcan. We're all trained how to use it. Actually, yesterday we took one of our quarterly trainings. We just worked on it, learning how to do it, making sure we're doing it right. There's a lot of people that are overdosing, and they're doing it daily. You know, one of the EMT guys that we talked to said that he's been to the same person 8 times. A lot of people have questions about, sometimes why are we doing this? Why are we spending all this money? Why are we doing this? We're doing it for that person, but we're also doing it for people's families. There's a lot of people that are affected by the death of an overdose. Working in narcotics, I respond to a lot of the overdose deaths. I work the overdose deaths. I see the families that are affected by it, and we're working with them. And they're the ones that are suffering in the end, as we work through that process. They're very hard to prosecute. It's hard to find somebody that is a suspect in this. So the Narcan itself it's saving more than just that person. It's helping that family. So the Narcan itself is an opiate blocker. And what it does is once somebody overdoses or somebody takes an opiate, the stuff that we carry, it's a 4 milligram spray that we can spray up a person's nostril. And what it does is I don't know the science behind it, but it goes in and it blocks the receptor so that the opiate that they just ingested or took or smoked or whatever, it blocks that. It takes that away. It's good, obviously, in the fact that it can save the person. It's bad in the fact that when it takes that away from them, it takes away their high. And they immediately snap out of it, or they can very quickly snap out of it, and sometimes become aggressive, angry, mad, whatever it is, because now you just took their high away from them. Whatever money they spent on that heroin, that fentanyl, is now gone, and now they gotta go find their next fix. They don't care that you save them a lot of the times. They just want to sign the medical release and get on to the next one. But it is a savior, and we're using it on a regular basis. Cocaine, I had said previously that it's on the rise again here in Olmsted County. A couple years ago, this is a picture, and you can see 4 kilos of cocaine coming up out of Texas. That was the biggest bust we've had in a long time. I wish it would have stayed that way, however it hasn't. In 2022, we seized 95 pounds of cocaine. Like I said, we're not sure why the increase of it. We've heard different statistics with things in Mexico with them having a harder time getting precursors for meth, so now they're trying to push cocaine up here. Also, cocaine is more expensive. Sometimes when the economy's better, cocaine becomes more prevalent because it's easier, you can afford it better, things like that. So unfortunately, we are seeing an increase in that. Now we get to the marijuana. It's a hot button topic. Here we got several different things. We got marijuana flower, which is the actual bud, the stuff that you smoke. Probably the most common thing that a lot of adults have seen or been around in their time. A lot of stuff you're smoking, or not you were smoking, but people were smoking back, several years ago, 5, 10, 15% THC levels, and if you got to 15, it was insane. We're looking at stuff now where these cartridges, that wax on the far side, and these edibles, we're looking at like 90% or higher THC levels. So the high from them is incredibly stronger than what it was before. And a lot of this stuff is extremely dangerous. We've been to overdoses of this, essentially, where a parent leaves it out and a kid gets at it. A little kid will get into this and will take one of these things and they're a fruit snack. When you look at those on the bottom, this top picture is actually a seizure from an apartment in Rochester where we took about 200 pounds of edibles that this guy was making himself. When you walked in there, it smelled delicious. He was making jello, all this stuff, nerve ropes, all sorts of candy that was all laced with THC. You bring that home, you have that around your kids, they're young kids. They don't know any better, they think they're eating nerds, candy ropes, something like that. Next thing you know, they're eating 90% pure THC. So you gotta be very careful with that stuff. Keep an eye on that. We're seeing that more and more. If you have seen stuff with your kids that they're just not acting right, they're hiding their backpack, they're doing stuff like that, keep an eye on that stuff. Be looking for this stuff, because unfortunately it's out there. The vapes are becoming a huge thing. We're seeing those pretty much everywhere. So this is a seizure of marijuana wax, or dabbing. Wax is essentially a derivative that's taken from the marijuana leaf or the stems and seeds. A lot of stuff that used to just be garbage that couldn't be used or smoked, they're now taking and they're using solvents to break it down, creating this marijuana wax, which then makes it usable. This stuff, again, is very potent. We're looking at like 80–90% THC levels. It costs between $50 and $60 a gram. So the value of this one little bit here is looking at $5,000 to $5,800 just for that little bit. So, as I said here, THC content is high as 90% or greater. The effects include problems with memory, learning, difficulty in thinking, and loss of coordination. And for all that, it only takes a dab. So when they're smoking this, using this, they call it a dab. It doesn't take a lot. Very little amounts of this stuff can be very potent, especially for people that don't use it. Some of the stuff to look for, different paraphernalia, things like that people are using to smoke their drugs or ingest it. The methamphetamine, things like that, the bulb on top. Marijuana is going to be more your middle one there. Just another bong over there. The scales, if you ever see scales, I don't know, myself, I've never used a scale that measures in 1 to 2 grams. If you're seeing scales like that, that's an indicator that something's going on. Because they're measuring out small amounts of marijuana, small amounts of meth, things like that. We're not seeing a ton of meth amongst our high school students, stuff like that, thank God. But if that stuff starts leaking into our schools, it's stuff we gotta be looking for, is these kind of things. People always wonder why, what's the turn on for it all? Everybody sees how you turn on, how it affects your body. Well, the true driver is money. A lot of this stuff we're seizing several $1,000s at a time from people that, some people have never seen that kind of money. They could work some job for weeks on end and not have $1 spare at the end of the time by the time they pay all their bills. Or they can go do this, they can go out and sling drugs for a few hours that night, and they got themselves several $1,000s. That's the driving force behind a lot of the dealers. I'll go over prescription drugs a little bit. They are still a problem. We're still having issues with them. People are still selling them, counterfeiting them, things like that. Everybody is being prescribed drugs for everything now. Adderall for our kids for ADHD, all the different, the oxys for pain, the fentanyl patches, things like that. We need to be very cognizant of those things. Keep them under lock and key. Keep them away from our kids. We're not seeing it as much now because now these fake oxy pills are becoming so prevalent. People aren't as much going into the cabinets. That doesn't mean that they won't. If it's easily accessible, they'll get at it. like I said, you know, you got your guns, you got the one on the left here, not real secure. Your kid can probably figure out how to get at those guns. You got the one on the right, pretty secure. You know, you're gonna wanna do that with your firearms. Same thing would be with your medications. You put it in a medicine cabinet in your bathroom, or you put it in a drawer, or you put it in a cupboard, it's easily accessible. Your kids can get at it, they can use it, they can sell it, they can do whatever. Keep it under lock and key. Keep it somewhere where only you know how to get at it, even if it's their medication. If you have any concerns about your kid with their medications, keep it under lock and key, and when it's time to give them medication, open up the lockbox, give your kid a medication. You don't want this stuff getting out, you know, especially when it comes to the painkillers, that's the painkillers. That's what's leading to a lot of our addictions with the opiates. Here at the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office, we have kind of a way to mitigate some of this stuff. A lot of people end up with extra pills. They get overprescribed. A loved one, a parent, a family member, whatever passes away, they have tons of drugs, tons of painkillers. They don't know what to do with them. Bring them to the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office. We have a drug drop box. It's a drug disposal box. It's right inside the vestibule of the Adult Detention Center. You can put any drugs in there 365 days a week, even if you were to find some illicit drug or something. Hopefully package it safely if you put it in there. But we don't want, you know, random stuff, hydrogen peroxide, sunscreen, stuff like that. You'd be amazed at what we find in this box. Keep it to, you know, the drugs, the stuff that's prescription, things like that we want to keep off our streets. This has been a huge helper. The DEA started this several years ago. We do a couple drug take-backs a year, but then on a daily basis, this is available for people to get rid of their stuff, to safeguard it from their kids, things like that. This here is a price breakdown of some of the drugs. I talked about the money a little bit before and kind of why it's so incentivized and why people want to do this. You can look at some of these prices and it shows you, you know, why it is what it is. You know, we go to the bottom here with the fentanyl pills. Here locally, we're looking at $5 for a pill. Where you go up to the Iron Range or up somewhere up north, and you're looking at $80 a pill. You can buy those pills for $1.50 to $2 in Arizona right now. They're bringing up 50, 60, 100,000 pills at a time. They're buying them for $1. You take them up to the Iron Range in Minnesota, you sell them for $80 a pill. That's the reason why this stuff is so prevalent up here. And it's like that across the board for pretty much everything. The prices, they've come down a lot just because of the supply and demand. There's such a high supply that the price has gone down, so it's making it easier and easier for people to use it and getting hooked on this stuff. In Olmsted County, we also have a drug court. Drug court mission is to integrate drug treatment services with the criminal justice system to provide an alternative to incarceration for nonviolent criminal drug offenders. Like I tell every drug offender that I talk to, that I work with, my ultimate goal is to get them off the drug. We want to get stuff off the street. We also want to get these people clean. 99% of these people are great people and they're not clouded by the drugs and things like that. So if they're clean and sober, they can make good, clear-headed decisions. A lot of them are great people. You get them on the drugs, they're completely different, changes them, changes their families, and just screws everything up. So at the end of the day, we're using things like drug court to hopefully, you know, curb some of that. Help get some of these people on the straight and narrow, get them to where they need to be so that they can be productive members of society. Last but not least, I am part of the Southeast Minnesota Violent Crime Enforcement Team. We work primarily in narcotics. We are available all hours of the day. We work as an 8-county task force here locally, and we will take any tips that we can get. No matter how big or small, we will vet them and determine what we have time to work on. If you have something, please don't hesitate to call the Sheriff's Office. Ask for a task force member if it has something to do with drugs. We're more than willing to take a look at it. That being said, I'll turn it over to Deputy Jason Owen.
All right, thank you, Joel. So as Joel was talking about all the drugs in Olmsted County, gave a rundown of that, I'm going to focus more on what's prevalent in our teens and our schools. So what we're mostly seeing in our schools is marijuana, prescription pills, categorized e-cigs, and tobacco as well in that category. We see less of, and there's a caveat here with alcohol. Alcohol is a major issue with teen use, but purpose of this, it's not really found inside the school, it's more of an issue outside of school. Things like meth, as Joel mentioned, LSD, not a huge issue in school. I mean, God forbid those things become prevalent in schools, but at this point, we're fortunate that it's not a widespread issue. So why are our youth using drugs? Same reason they do everything. Peers, stress management, they get used for, some of the older teens will use stimulants for study practices, help keep them awake. One of my pet peeves is public perception and social media, what our kids are exposed to, Hollywood stars who they look up to as heroes in many cases. It's a lot of drug use just gets glorified, and there's no doubt about it that exposure that they're getting is affecting their choices. Ease of access, a lot of the reasons that these ones that are more prevalent, like marijuana, prescription pills, it's easy access for our kids. Marijuana is prevalent in society. In some states it's legal. It's easy to get into Minnesota, easy to get in Olmsted County. Another reason kids might use it is they get these pills from at home from mom and dad, and they're able to make a little money off it, sell it to other kids, trade it for things like that. So tips for parents. It says there, use your nose. That's just another term for be nosy. Talk to your kids, have face-to-face conversations. Get to know their parents. Kids will, tell you they're doing one thing, and we all know that that might not be the case. But if you're talking with each other's parents, it's more difficult for them to pull the wool over your eyes. So you need to know what your kids are doing, where they're going at night, why they got home late, things like that. Pay attention to all the signs of the physical signs. Cough, talks about red eyes, watch for mood changes. Depression is either it can lead to drug use, and it can also be a symptom of drug use. Who are they hanging out with? Their vehicles, if they're a driving age, check that vehicle every once in a while. That's where things get hidden. Look in the glove compartment, look in the cubbies, in the consoles. You might find some indicators in there, just some drug paraphernalia, anything suspicious, and we'll get into more of these things later. Just a chart here. I'm not going to read through all of that. It's too many words, but it goes over a lot of the physical changes you might notice for kids at home, and just pay attention to these. A lot of it's just things out of the ordinary, changes of behavior, rashes, burnt lips, things. All of these things are so marijuana, one of the most common drugs used, if you're not including alcohol. It's a kind of an accepted thing in society now. We can debate about whether it should be illegal or not, but I think all of us here would agree that we should at least not want our kids using it. Some of these terms here, some things you become familiar with, just the clothing people wear. The terms Kush, ounces, 420, signifying the April 20th as the unofficial holiday of marijuana. Just get familiar with these terms, and if your kids are using them, ask them, where did you hear that? Why, what does that mean? They might not even know what it means. Like I said, marijuana is one of the most commonly used drugs, partly because it's legal in many areas. A lot of the symptoms include the altered senses, perceptions, mood changes, coordination. Yeah, just pay attention to these signs, and the changes of appetite is another one. Just all these behaviors can be indicated. Another common, easy to get to drug, and and this would fall into the category of over-the-counter medications. This cough syrup, due mostly to the ingredient dextromorphin. The slang terms there, like such as DXM, Dex, Dexing, Orange Crush, a lot. Scissor was another one that's used a lot. And they use this cough syrup. Sometimes they'll mix it with pop, other drinks to help with the taste and such. But that is, even though it's an over-the-counter drug, if you take it in large quantities, it can be very dangerous because like a lethargic, hallucinogenic effect that the high that kids might be looking for. Like I said, the symptoms of DXM here are hallucinations, out-of-body sensations, having trouble controlling your limbs, impaired judgment. And like I said, it might seem safe, but it's a little over the counter, but if used in large quantities, it can cause loss of consciousness, seizures, and even death. Another one of the pills, prescription pills that we often see is Xanax. Xanax itself is treated for like ADHD, things like that. I also don't want to exclude things like painkillers, oxycodone, and then of course we have the issues with counterfeit oxycodone containing fentanyl. But you might see your kids use or see the terms bars, bicycle handlebars, blackout boys, benzos, footballs, ladders, planks, school bus. Most of those words are referencing the look of the pill, which is that yellow pill there that's kind of, I guess, looks like a school bus or a yellow bar, as they call it. Some of the effects that Xanax could have: sleepiness, lethargic, slurred, nonsensical speech, slowed or labored breathing, and a slow pulse rate, lack of coordination, muscle control, and it can lead to difficulty walking, and then dizziness, lightheaded, confusion, dulled senses, and a reduced reaction time. Okay, so then with clothing and some of the lingo that you might see. Dabby, as we talked about, with marijuana wax, hemp bracelets, just the marijuana culture and so on. You know, it's just kind of seeped in society that it's acceptable. In many cases, legal. But just because something's legal doesn't mean you should do it, or that it's good for you, or that it's even safe. Some of the club drugs, and these are some of the drugs that aren't just prevalent in the schools, but still that kids do use, but not. It's not prevalent in Olmsted County, and it's not being brought into our schools at a high rate. Some concealment products that you should all be aware of, and these are, other belt buckles and belts, and you can get these types of items off of Amazon. You can get them at gift shops like Spencer's Gifts, large truck stops, travel centers have them, adult stores. All these items here described as are concealed as personal hygiene products, but actually they're hidden compartments. Some more personal hygiene products, and some other home devices. Okay, vaping and e-cigarettes. So as we all know, vaping is the inhaling of an aerosol. It's not tobacco, but it uses nicotine, so it's just as addictive as tobacco, and also unhealthy. It's still bad for your health. It has harmful chemicals, glycerol, propylene, glycol, things that I don't even know what they are, but linked to cancer, things like that. They're just as addictive as cigarettes, and kids are using them very prevalently because they're much easier to hide. They don't have the smell that cigarettes do. easy to hide because of the little odor, very small. They are distributed. They have the flavors they use are very appealing to our kids. Cotton candy flavors, strawberry flavors. One of the more popular brands of vaping is the Juul product. It's very small, the size of a USB drive, and they have quite a large market. Here's a comparison of the Juul device to a USB drive. So then, to summarize here at the end, what happens if your kid gets caught? We can get involved. Law enforcement, work with the parents. We can ticket the individual. If it's a serious enough offense, it can be arrestable depending on the drug that's found. And then it's the court probation. But the main thing is the responsibility really needs to start with the parents at home and the schools, because there's only so much law enforcement can do. It's got to be the parents communicating with the kids and the schools to get a handle on this. And with that, I'm going to turn this over then to Andrea White. She's the Safe Harbor and Olmsted County Victim Services. And she's going to talk about sex trafficking and extortion.
How's everyone doing? It's a lot of topics to talk about tonight, right? So I am going to join the conversation. My name is Andrea White. I'm the Safe Harbor Regional Navigator for Southeastern Minnesota. And a part of my job is really just being the first point of contact in any moments where we have labor, sex trafficking, exploitation, or anyone that might be at risk for any of those. We are housed in Olmsted County Victim Services. We serve an 11-county region in southeastern Minnesota. And alongside myself, I also have a team of case managers. I like to say that they're the meat and potatoes of our work, because they work with youth day in and day out, really coming alongside them, getting wraparound services, and of course educating on this topic. So as you might see here, we are funded by the Minnesota Department of Health, and the reason why I mention that is it's really important to understand that we've talked this evening about grooming and other things that might lead you to have concern before victimization occurs. And I want to give you all hope that as much as you've heard talking to your children, that's prevention. And that's really the state where we want to live, not intervention. And so a big part of our program is being here this evening and talking with all of you so that we can have these conversations day in and day out with our youth in hopes to avoid any victimizations that might occur. So I always like to get started on the same page. When I use the words exploitation and trafficking, that might be the verbiage that I use every day because it's my job, but we don't use that in our daily lives, do we? So when I talk about exploitation, this lies on the spectrum of sexual violence, and this is any point in time where we have two parties, where one is looking to exchange something of value for a sexual act. That something of value can be a lot of different things. It could be a ride home from school. It could be a relationship. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs, right? And so if there's a need, an unmet need that's present with our youth, a lot of times folks are coming in to groom them to receive a sexual act in exchange. Now, we've talked a little bit about explicit content online this evening, both images and videos. That would be encapsulated in that sexual exploitation definition. And below, I like to say that when you look at it on the spectrum of sexual violence, we have exploitation. We know that's a precursor. Oftentimes, folks will then groom their victims to be trafficked, right? And so anytime we have a trafficking case, we're going to still have that foundation of exploitation. But what we're going to do and what changes that definition is you're going to have a third party. That third party is the one who's not only initiating, setting it up, planning it, they're also the one who's receiving the benefits on the back end. Okay, so these are both of the crimes that we cover and the experiences of our victims, but also we work with folks who are at risk for either of these. Okay, so a lot of the things that we as caregivers or parents might have concerns about, that's going to increase that risk for someone to come in and say, hey, I can be your friend. right? Mom and dad, they're really not listening, are you? My parents were terrible. How about you and I connect? Just like Detective Johnson was talking about some of those grooming techniques and the language that they use to pull folks in. Now I have it on this graphic here because I like to really just point out that this isn't a black and white issue. This is intersectional, this is complex. Many of our victims have had really traumatic lives where they may have had victimizations in their youth, they may have struggles with their mental health, chemical dependency. So there's a lot of needs that folks have when they present in our office for services. I also like to get started on some of the language that we use nowadays. So how many of you have seen Pretty Woman? Taken, right? The media really likes to grab on to trafficking, and we've seen a lot of progression, especially here in Minnesota. We're a large leader when it comes to having a response to exploitation and trafficking. And so I just put this up here to really kind of show the shift in the language, where we now can understand and come behind that this is something that happens to someone, right? People don't ask to be sexually assaulted. They also don't ask to be sex trafficked. So when we are shifting our language, I just think it's important to be kind to people and educate, and so that's really what this slide is here. No longer are we using pimp. We know that pimp has some preconceived stigmas or stereotypes, right? You might think of an identity or someone when you hear that word, but really we have traffickers and exploiters of all identities. I've had cases of grandmothers exploiting youth. I've had cases of parents. I've had siblings. I've had friends. So when we are looking at this, we really want to make sure that we're opening up our language to encapsulate the full experience, because if we're not talking about what this looks like, then we're going to miss out on that conversation. And of course, the one thing that you take home today is what Detective Johnson said: talk to your kids, and use the right language when we're doing that. So Kyle, if you could play this video. I have a short clip for all of you to watch, and then I just want to let you all sit in taking in what this video covers. Stick with us, the suspense is building. I promise the video's worth it. That's okay. So I'm going to give you guys a link. This here is taken from Thorn. It's another great resource. We've thrown out a couple here this evening. Thorn is specific to supporting parents and caregivers as they tackle these conversations. And really what this video entails, and why I like it so much, is it starts out with talking about how we might be seeing the next tech unicorn, right? How connected we are, how at ease it is to communicate with the people in your life. And you might think that that's a great thing, but if we don't realize the connections that are being made by people who want to harm others, especially people who are vulnerable, we can see how this maybe isn't the great direction that we're going in, right? And so I always say that as much as we're talking with our youth, with them coming home from school, debriefing the day, right? Who did you sit with at lunch? Who did you play with at recess? You should be checking in with them. What apps are you using? Who are you talking to? What games do you play, right? In a car, it's a great place. Park those butts right in the seat, and then you got them for what, 10, 15 minutes is typically the rides around this area. So have those conversations and use those as just everyday examples to keep on checking in with your youth. Use it as a moment of education. I think I'm going to show some other resources here this evening, but go home, pull this video up, watch it with your youth, and then talk about it. The video is 1.5 minutes, but that takes the pressure off of you as the caregiver, right? To come in and have this big, heavy conversation that can be intimidating. And we want to equip you all as caregivers with the best resources and tools that we all use as professionals every day. So I want you guys to go ahead and read this slide. Detective Johnson said a little bit about this. He mentioned the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They are the clearinghouse whenever we have a cyber tip online that's flagged for that child sexual abuse material or child pornography, as we used to say. So as you can see here, what happened during COVID? Where were our youth? Online, right? And we saw a dramatic increase in the exploitation of our youth online during this time. So it reads, in 2021, NCMEC's cyber tip line received 29.3 million reports of suspected child exploitation. This is an increase of 35% from 2020. What happened from 2020 to 2021? We went onto our devices because we couldn't be in person. And so don't fool yourself. If your children and your youth, like most are, living on devices of some sort, you need to be checking in on them. All right, so I have some fast facts to throw at you guys, really to get behind what this looks like here in Minnesota. I mentioned that Minnesota is a leader in our response against exploitation and trafficking through our Safe Harbor response. Back in 2019, if anyone's ever heard of the Minnesota Student Survey, we were able to sneak in a question to that survey. This is a public health survey. It's full of a wealth of knowledge about what it looks like for our children's experiences, from, is your hygiene okay, to are you eating healthy foods, do you have supportive people in your life, what have your experiences been like? So in 2019, we asked the question, have you ever exchanged a sexual act for something of value? And on that one given day across the state of Minnesota, we had 5,000 students say yes to that question. This is the first time we've ever asked that question. Now, mind you, they didn't have a PowerPoint presentation to give them definitions about this, right? They were at school, they had a piece of paper, and they had hundreds of questions to answer. Now, what we were able to do from the research that was done on this is really take a deep dive and be able to talk about what our youth experiences in Minnesota are regarding and surrounding moments and experiences of exploitation. So you can see here we are in the southeast region. We had a response rate of about 1.3%, and I know that that sounds like a small number, but think about those 5,000 students. We shouldn't have any numbers up on this board, right? That's our hope. So if you're looking, if you're a research nerd like me, this was done in partnership with the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Department of Health, and of course the Minnesota Student Survey. The slide notes here that this is likely an underestimate. We know that when we talk about sexual violence in general, it typically is an underestimate because people don't disclose their sexual violence experiences. When we look at the data more here, we can see how this breaks down. We know that many of our minorities are experiencing exploitation at a greater rate. And remember at the beginning with those two arrows, I said that this is an intersectional issue. It's because we've got a lot going on that might increase those vulnerabilities of the folks who are being affected by this crime. Here, I think it's just important to note the relevant experiences of the youth that said yes to this question. So of those 5,000 students, 12% of them were in a JDC, a correctional institution for minors, when they said yes, right? We have 8.1% of those 5,000 students that are foster care. I mentioned earlier this risk factor of having prior sexual violence in their life. That's at almost 8% again of those 5,000 students. Unstable housing in the past year is another co-occurring experience of those who have been exploited, or attending an alternative learning center. Thank you. That is at 5.4% of that 5,000 students that said yes. So understanding that we have a lot of needs for these folks who have these experiences. So, it doesn't look like it came up in here, but in Olmsted County, one of the biggest things that we saw from our local data, and this is the biggest gift that this research has given us, we had for the first time research to say that our young boys and our young girls are experiencing this at equal rates. They were 0.2% off of one another. So this isn't just a conversation about young girls. Of course, we see that happening in our victimizations, but it's so much more. If you don't have conversations about healthy relationships and boundaries and consent and in an age-appropriate way with our youth throughout their childhood, then we're missing the mark of almost half of our population, right? And then when we look towards our communities of folks who identify in the LGBTQ+ community, they're highly disproportionately represented in this crime because they don't oftentimes have community to access. So where do they go? Online to meet people, right? And then those people take advantage of them. And so our youth are hungry for community and connection right now, and if we don't give them healthy opportunities to have pro-social opportunities, to be involved in school, to have healthy relationships in all aspects of their life, people online are going to find them. Now that I dropped all this heaviness on you, there's hope. Like I mentioned, we have our program and our embedded response here in our 11-county region. And so just a little bit about our work. We do have a 24-hour crisis line. In all honesty, I was actually set to be on call tonight, but because I'm here, I got my shift covered. But we are available all day, every day. For anyone who wants to talk, to ask questions, to seek out help, to know what their rights are as a victim, you can give our line a call. It is also confidential and voluntary, so youth can call without disclosing their name or their age and just say, this might have happened to me and I don't know what to do. So then we can have a healthy and safe person say, you know, have you talked to your mom and dad yet about that? Or your caregiver? Who is someone trusted in your life that we can turn to and kind of walk through this step by step with one another? I like to say that the biggest job of a sexual assault advocate is just to be a voice for people when they don't feel like they can use theirs. We also offer training, so I'm going to show a couple of opportunities, but whether it's coming out to a school and talking with our youth, if it's coming out to a church community or any sort of group, we're always happy to do training on this topic. We offer consultation for professionals who are out in the field who might come along, clients or people they're working with who have some of these experiences. We offer, like I said, that meat and potatoes of our case management. We have awesome staff on my team that work really diligently with our youth to educate them day in and day out. We also are embedded in the system, right? So we're at Olmsted County, and a big part of my job is making sure that every single person who might encounter someone who has this experience feels like they have the tools and the resources to do their work in that moment. All right, so this is a really wonderful opportunity. This is a monthly caregiver training that I host with a local shelter on Wald. It's out of 180 degrees. One of their staff and myself, we do a virtual caregiver training. It's 2 hours, but it's really an hour and a half. We get out of there pretty quick most times. So if you scan this QR code, it'll actually bring you right to our Eventbrite page. You can register for any of our upcoming trainings. I also included a flyer on the back table alongside a parent caregiver handout just to kind of bring with you in terms of education of what do you do as a parent in this situation? What are your resources? So we really walk through what to look for, how to talk to youth. We have a lot of great videos, like I said, and so please tune in. If you have a community where you would want us to bring this presentation to you, again, reach out and we're more than happy to do it. I think it's better in person than on virtual spaces, but that's where we live in these days, and it's accessible after hours. We also have outreach materials, so this is done by MDH. They recently did a focus group a few years ago where they took the real life stories of victims and survivors and put them into materials so that we can have posters around in our communities to really pull back some of those layers of stigma and stereotype to show what the real experiences are. So the folks on these posters aren't the actual victims or survivors, but the stories are theirs. And this is my contact information, so I'm going to pass it back to the sheriff for our last speaker.
Thanks, Andrea. So in developing this back before COVID, we talked about the different areas that we wanted to do this in, and how could we really bring it to kind of full circle, how could we bring it down, and of course, give the opportunity for people to really see the impact of it. And, question and answers, which we're gonna get to in a little bit, is really the culmination of it, but the next piece on your program is called Family Impact. And we're gonna bring up a gentleman here who really just came out of nowhere for me, actually. We were at a program a few years back where some of our state legislators and a couple of our local ones were, I can't remember what I think it was about, Truth About Marijuana, I think was the name of the program, but it was all really tailored towards why they wanted to make marijuana legal. And they've been working at it now for several years, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where I see it happening and what's going on right now with St. Paul. But this gentleman happened to be there. I didn't know him that day. And we were asking some questions that was making some of the people in the crowd uncomfortable because they didn't like what we were asking and our concerns about safety and youth access and safety on the roads and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the questions they didn't want to hear and didn't want to talk about was that marijuana is a drug. It's not safe. Yes, it does not, as we know of right now, kill people directly, but there's a lot of other challenges with it. And we were pretty much getting kind of sloughed off, like you guys are being a pest. There was other people there. We're supposed to be representing southeast Minnesota and Rochester and Olmsted County, but we found out as we asked the questions myself, I was there, the person that was in charge of our violent crime enforcement team was there, Captain Vince Sheckle at the time. There was a few other people there, some members from the local Mothers Against Drunk Driving organization was there, and there was a couple other people that were asking similar questions. There was about 6 or 7 of us, and the rest of the room was kind of like this. It was sparse, but yet everybody was there for various reasons. Except we were the only ones that were there from southeast Minnesota asking the difficult questions. Everyone else that was there, we learned afterwards, was from the metro area and from cities and other parts, so they weren't from Minnesota, or from southeast Minnesota. And then this gentleman stood up, and it took a lot of courage that day to say what he said and to direct his questions directly to some of our legislators. And so with that, I want to build it up too much more because his story is really important, and that's why we added in the family impact piece. Because I can sit here and I can tell you all kinds of things. All of our people, Andrea, the guys, Courtney, we can tell you all the challenges that we see, but it's not us. It's not a personal thing. So that was the piece we added, was to bring in a family impact and bring in someone who has experienced the worst of what drug addiction and youth challenges and mental health issues and things like that have. And when it comes into your home and you're surrounded by this and your life is consumed by it, where do you go? What do you do? So with that, I'm going to bring up Mr. Ray Hicks, and he's got a story to tell you. Thank you. Ray?
I'm going to break the pattern a little bit here because I had to bring along my mechanical teleprompter tonight, and there's too many gadgets here to handle and flip pages. So I hope you can bear with me on that. Thank you, Sheriff, for the words there. He described that meeting pretty well. That meeting was hard on me. I was the last speaker, and I wanted to stand up many times during that. It was a town hall, with 3 Democratic legislatures and somebody else. And it was hard for me to get up, but every time I tried to, somebody else would stand up. And I got a sense that God didn't want me to speak. He was like saying, not yet, not yet. Well, yet came for the last speaker that day. That's when I stood up, and it was a difficult time because I'd lost my son about 6 months, 5 or 6 months before that meeting. It wasn't something I wanted to just go out and take on the world, but it meant too much to me to not go and say something. So with that, let me get to what I really came for. I think I'm upside down here.
There you go, the right one.
Yep. What did I do? We're on the old slides, I think. Yep. Do you have the new presentation we put in there? Is that it? That might be it. No, that's still the old one.
That's the old presentation.
Okay. We loaded it up just before the meeting. Is it lost here? Okay, I'll do the best I can. I'm going to skip over a lot of slides in here and try to stick on the picture ones because they should be the same here. And I'm going to go back and forth a little too because they're slightly different order. I apologize. This is where I wanted to start on this one. That's our older son, Jay, on the left there. When he was 1 year old, we adopted our boys from South Korea, and it's traditional there to dress them up in the traditional costume around their first birthday for pictures. So he's wearing a handbuck in that picture from South Korea. Just the other picture, I tried to be a little humorous. That's Kyle joined us about a year after Jay, and that's the 2 of them. And you know what sweater vests are up there, but I put it on the slide to tell you that handbuck is apparel, so you wouldn't be guessing. We married, my wife and I, in 1992. It's just a couple weeks before my 39th birthday. So our family has started late, later than a lot of them do. And, I get that contrast. I'm old enough to be my boys' granddad. My sister has 15 grandchildren with one that was just born. I'm down to 1 son left of 2 right now. So that's enough on that one. Let's skip ahead a couple here. Oh, no, wait, it was backwards. I wanted to go to that one next. That's a picture of our family about 20 years ago. It's my lovely wife, Nancy, and Jay and Kyle down at the bottom there. Jay joined our family in May of 1998. Kyle came in July of 99. We looked at those days they arrived here as a lot of adoptive families call those your gotcha day. And we celebrated that as a special day with our boys each year. Side note, Kyle on the right there, he was born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate, and he also had a heart condition that we heard of that turned out not to be very serious. But we went into this choosing a special needs child. We ended up with 2 very special needs children. So now I'll skip ahead several and get back in sync here. Yep, that's it. Typical boys. They liked playgrounds growing up. They liked climbing stuff, liked adventure, getting attention. That picture on the right there was a field trip. I believe it was the 4th grade. I was there as a parent chaperone, and we were at Fort Snelling. They asked for a volunteer from the class to model some of the soldier apparel and equipment. And Jay was real quick to pop up, and there you see him wearing the uniform, holding the gun, other things. I was proud of him that day just to see him step up like that. So. Skip ahead here again. That's a couple of pictures on a summer vacation at Uncle Rick and Aunt Wendy's. That's my sister's brother. They loved fishing up there, boating, swimming, tubing, all sorts of things, that were fun. My wife and I actually plan to move back to that area when she retires in a few years, because all our relatives are in Michigan. And we actually buried Jay's body in that area. And there's a reason for that I could go into. It has to do with the particular mental health condition he had. Somebody wants to ask me about that later, I'll share it. So. Next slide is a couple pictures from Camp Moonwa. That's an annual Korean culture camp that's held here in Rochester. And I enjoyed that camp a lot because we got Korean food every day and I loved it, But the boys loved it too, all the children did. There's quite a lot of adoptive families, Korean adoptive families here, and it kept that camp thriving each year. So it was a wonderful time. Oh, another thing to mention on that is when Jay aged out of the camp, twice he volunteered and served as a camp counselor, helping younger children, and I was very, very proud of him doing that. There's Jay on the left there, playing a saxophone in the school band. He enjoyed that a lot. And, after a couple of years, he got picked to move from the alto sax up to the baritone one, and he was real proud of that. So he was, in the right, you can see him with the skateboard. Not the best picture that I could pull out of there, but he just loved skateboarding. He was at the parks and loved going to them. He'd tear those things apart, put them back together, customize them, all sorts of skateboards, longboards. That was a love he had. So. Okay, next one. Whoops, I don't know where I got to there. Oh, I skipped too far. Yeah, that's the one I want. That one will bore you for a little bit because this is where I really want to share some things about our experience as a family and the impact. And one thing, it came out, in some of the speakers of what causes children to use drugs. And there are many reasons. Our situations are unique. Ours happened to be one of the big factors in our home that I don't think I heard mentioned was mental health, and that's, Jay suffered with that, and it worsened as he grew. It's a difficult thing to diagnose properly too. There's a lot of guesswork and trial and stuff as the professionals work through that, especially when the children are showing it and they're real young. It's difficult. So we saw a lot of different diagnoses, and they changed through the school years. In high school, it became real apparent to us. My wife discovered it first, and I won't go into the long story of that, which is interesting. But when she did, she pointed it out to me, and I shook my head. That seems to nail it. And we went back to the professionals, and they all concurred, He had borderline personality disorder, and I had never heard of that before. That sounds pretty benign to me by name. It doesn't, so, you know, borderline, it doesn't sound serious. Well, it is, you know, one of the worst disorders you can have. It's right up there with bipolar, you know, and I had several families that dealt with bipolar told me they'd never want what we were dealing with. You know, they all said it was worse, you know, and I can't tell you that for sure. I just know it was hard, you know. I just do. And sadly, this is where the drug story comes in a little bit. Sadly, one of the things that happens with a lot of these people with this disorder and others is they try to escape. They try to deaden the pain they have. And they turned to drugs a lot of times. Our son was self-medicating and sort of self-treating his condition. You know, and you have to look at it in that light because that was a big component of it. The peer stuff was there too. It wasn't absent, but the mental health was a huge part. His abuse became apparent in his middle school years, and that's where we started discovering some of you heard him mention the household prescriptions, you know, don't leave them out, you know, they'll get used. Well, our son probably got some of those out of our cabinet, but we started finding stuff that wasn't in our home and it didn't belong to him. You know, it comes from all over. He eventually progressed to marijuana use, which Sheriff mentioned at Town Hall was focused on legalizing it. And I have strong feelings about that. I'm convinced that they like to call it cannabis, you know. I'm convinced that it harms the brain development of our youth. I'm sure it didn't help anyway. I can tell you that for sure. And I do believe it's a gateway. I believe people that go down these paths of trying things and they get into that marijuana, it's a gateway to me. You know, some people say no, you can argue it. But I believe if you get your children using that stuff, the chances that they'll progress to something more dangerous are a lot higher. And that happened with our son. Eventually, he got into all sorts of things. I saw him very sick over with magic mushrooms. Somebody mentioned that here tonight. So what I do want you to know is that those drugs are unfortunately very easy for our youth to get. Very easy. Some of them came right to our mailbox, you know, from countries, from Canada, from European countries. I saw it, you know, and I had to deal with that. June 3rd, 2019, Jay used something that was laced with fentanyl. He died in his bedroom from fentanyl poisoning. He was 21. I was home in the house all day. I didn't know. His brother found him there. It was too late. You know, somebody mentioned Narcan here too tonight, and when we were cleaning Jay's room out, you know, in the days after, we found he had Narcan in the room. I didn't know it was there. I wouldn't have known how to use it. But by the time he was found, it was too late. So, skip to the next one. I'm just about done here. The hurt still remains. You know, you're always grieving. Always stays with you. It transforms. You heal a little bit. You never get over it. You know. And things trigger it. You can you can have your bad times. They can come out of nowhere unexpectedly. I take comfort, though, in knowing God God put Jay in our family, and I think I missed saying it, but right at the start of this presentation, I told you when we got married in 1992. It was later in life, so we wanted to hurry up and grow the family, have children. We tried 3 years unsuccessfully. Then we turned to Mayo Clinic for help, and we worked with them for a couple years, and that didn't work. On December 17th, 1997, we were having a closeout appointment with the fertility doctor, just closing that chapter out. And he stepped out. And I looked to my wife and I said, we need to pray. And as I began praying, I had a strong sense that God had a child, not any child, a particular child. And it wasn't much a week or two after that we got a referral from our adoption agency for Jay. And when we told them we were interested, they sent his birth certificate down. He was born December 17th, the same day we were praying. Now, to bring you back to this slide, I take comfort in knowing that has come to me many times and other signs that God put him in our family. God knew what his problems were going to be. And God knew that I grew up in a home with mental illness, and it was the last thing I would have wanted or chosen. But God trusted Jay, and it was no accident. And your children, it's no accident that they're with you. God's trusting you with them. So he doesn't make mistakes. And I'd like to leave you with the one last one, and I don't think I have that in that presentation, so I think I'll just leave you on that one and tell you what's on it. Your presence is encouraging to me. It shows you care about your children and want to guard them. I hope and pray that no one will suffer loss of a child to drugs or any other thing, whether it's gun violence or any of these things that we'd like to never see happen. I want you to know that as a family that we sought a lot of help over the years from many directions. The slide I wanted to put up there has 4 things I want to leave you with here. I want you not to fear, not to let fear or stigma keep you from seeking help that you and your loved one needs. Don't let that stop you. If one path and one attempt at getting help doesn't work out real well, seek another path. Don't give up. Your love matters. And I'll leave you with that. So.
I think we can clap for that, if we can, please. Thank you, Ray. That's the first time I've heard it. I didn't know the whole rest of the story. I've seen the slides come through, but I intentionally did not look at them too much because I wanted to hear it firsthand. And we've had a family impact speaker, as I mentioned, for several of these now. I think the first one was the one we didn't, and after that we've been doing that consistently. And unfortunately, there's too many of those families out there. So what I'm going to ask the panelists to do, and maybe, I don't know, probably if we could, go ahead, you guys move out there and we'll see how the screen plays on your heads as you're sitting in front. But I'm going to have you sit in front right out there in the middle. So just, Joel, if you could lead the group down and put a chair up front in here. Courtney, take this with you. You got your hands full. Dan, take the mic with you. I'm going to come down this way. I'm going to just make some comments that I want to make while they're getting situated and while you're kind of thinking about what questions you might want to ask these folks. So these are comments that I just wrote down as I was listening. I don't know how this is messing up your streaming piece there, Kyle. I'm sorry I didn't ask you about that.
But just some random thoughts as they were going through their comments and as they were making their presentations. Your home is your home. Your kid's room is their room, but you own the house. Their car or the car they drive, as long as they belong to you at their home, at your home, is yours. You have full access to it. I can't tell you how many times in my growing up as a cop career, I'm guessing these folks behind me have probably seen it too, and that is where a parent has said, I can't go in their room, that's their area, that's their privacy, they need their privacy. Sorry, all bets are off, they're your kid. You have full access to everything. Their backpack, it's their backpack, but it's in your house, it's not your backpack. So please, don't fall victim in that sense to some of those things. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. So my wife and I have 2 kids. They graduated from Stewartville High School, so I live here in Stewartville. And one of the things that was mentioned early on, and I don't remember which speaker it was, but it cued a memory, and I just like, I gotta tell that quick story. And I told this at their graduations many times. So my son, Nick, was probably middle school age, 6th or 7th grade, I suppose, and you know, I'm not a really big car guy or anything, but you know, I like to look at nice vehicles and things like that. And one day, I still can picture this. I know exactly where we were. We were southbound past Denny's, and Crossroads is on my right, and you know, the restaurants and things are there. And we're coming up to that stop sign that goes into the fairgrounds, right? Grand Park, you all know where I'm at, southbound. And it's a beautiful summer, just a gorgeous day. I'd been in the office, it was a day off, and I had gone in and got some things done, and we were heading back home. And as I pull up to the stoplight, I'm looking in my rearview mirror, I'm always being aware of what's around me, and here comes this really super hot looking red car, convertible, just wow. I'm like, and I look in the mirror, I'm like, whoa, take a look at this thing. And as it's coming up, I'm looking closer, and the driver is a very attractive blonde female. So it was a double, like, wow, wow. And Nick looks over and he's like, whoa. And he's making some noises like that, and nothing's being said between the two of us. And the car stops next to us in the right-hand lane, and the lady stops, and there's a little fidgeting going on, and then takes a nice long drag off a cigarette, and I'm going, and Nick goes, ugh. And I went, yes, I did it. I'm there. He'd been through DARE class, he'd been there, and it was all about, remember that commercial, those of us that are my age or maybe a little younger, there was that old commercial, father like son, the dad's in a park, they're playing, and all these things are going on, and they go and they sit down and they take a break next to a tree, and the dad takes out a cigarette out of his pocket and starts to light it, and then he puts the cigarette pack down between him and his son. And then the son picks it up, and then they freeze frame, and it goes like father, like son. Have you talked to your kids today? So we model a lot. Those kids are watching us. You don't have to, you know, we're saying tonight, and I'm 100% behind what the speakers have said in the sense of you need to talk to your kids. You need to set your rules. You need to set the boundaries. You need to make sure that they understand every single day where you are with all of these things. And we've thrown a lot of scary stuff out there tonight. And I know we've got some folks streaming, and I hope that they really understand it. But boy, it's never too late to establish rules. However, on the other side of it, I think my law enforcement partners here tonight would agree that I can't tell you how many calls I've gone to where it's a 13-year-old, 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old out of control at the home. They get there, you know, and they're throwing stuff, smashing stuff, slamming doors, things are happening. It's chaos in that home, and it's scary. And we show up because we are their last resort. And get things calmed down, talking to parents, what was going on. Nothing much we can do. They're in your house, and it's not necessarily a crime. They didn't threaten anybody. They just were really scary. So no, I'm sorry, we may not take them away. Maybe call some of Andrew's colleagues in social services and say, hey, you know, we got this kid, there's some help they need here. And the situation then develops where the parents say, well, you know, we've noticed some problems and we just decided to lay down the law. Well, good. You're about 8 years too late. you need to get these things done, and that's where when I talk to the DARE kids, and we're talking about 5th and 6th grade, here in Stewart, we're doing 6th grade, it's that point. Those 6th grade kids are now roughly 5 years away from driving a car. And when parents put it into that perspective, I hope they go home and go, wow, we need to have a conversation, we start doing this now. So, I'm going to jump ahead because I'm going to talk about the marijuana bill, probably the last piece of this. Let's see. Oh, one of the comments I wanted to add to what Joel Johnson was talking about the drugs and things like that, and the overdoses. The Olmsted County Medical Examiner's Office is actually Mayo Clinic. We contract with them. And over the last year, as Joe's slide was talking about, the overdoses throughout the state of Minnesota just skyrocketing since COVID and just out of control. It really is. It's out of control. We don't have a real idea how many overdoses are happening every single day in Olmsted County or across the state or across the country. What we do know is we can count them, the ones that die. And unfortunately, Ray had to experience that. But here in Olmsted County, the medical examiner is telling us the drugs are not just pure this or that or anything else. They're combo drugs. It's meth with fentanyl. It's meth with other things. It's fentanyl with other things. It's fentanyl in marijuana. It's everywhere. It's the whole bit. And that day we were talking to him. We got a presentation. We had a discussion with the coroner's office medical examiner in December, and then he made a presentation in January to the county board just a couple weeks ago. And they had that conversation, and we talked to him and he said, well, Doc, where on here are you seeing fentanyl and marijuana? Because we're finding out, we're hearing through our sources that there's a pretty high, getting to be a higher percentage, as high as 20% of marijuana that's coming in through the country that has fentanyl sprinkled on it. And he's like, well, we don't test for marijuana, it doesn't kill people. I know, Doc, but fentanyl does, and it's combo. It's a combo factor, just like all the rest of your slides, just like all the rest of your stuff. And if you walk to Ray, Dr. Riker is a wonderful man, and he looks at his assistant that day and he said, I think we need to start doing that too. It's everywhere, and it's a factor, and it's just, you just don't know what's happening, and like Ray's family in that situation, it was fentanyl that killed him, but who knows what the combo was. And it's just really scary right now. I think you figure that out as we've been talking. One other comment I was talking about, again in Joel's slides, he showed the slide of the drug devices, we call it paraphernalia. But did you know that that stuff can be sold in any store? And you mentioned, I think you said different stores and different things like that where it's available. Spencer Gifts, some of the other things are there. It's legal to sell that stuff. And people always ask, one of the questions I've gotten forever is, well, how can they sell that? Because it's only going to be used for pot and heroin and, you know, smoking meth and doing stuff like that. Well, because it's considered art. It's not paraphernalia or drug-related paraphernalia until it is used. And so familiarize yourself. It's real easy. Go into those places, look at that stuff, get to know what it looks like, get to be aware of those things. Again, the slides are on the program. I was sitting up here on my phone watching the speakers go through because we couldn't see the screen, and watching the presentations as it goes through. So do use the QR code, go back on it, you'll have all the slides right there, and away you go. One of the other things that was going on, we were talking, Jason was talking about the clothing. If all of a sudden your kid is fascinated with Adidas brand, maybe you have an issue. And if you don't know what that looks like, I'm just going to leave you with that. Why is the Adidas brand the problem? Well, I'll tell you. Because the brand, the Adidas, looks like the marijuana leaf. And now, why is Adidas all of a sudden so popular in my son's or daughter's wardrobe? No, better ask some questions. And then I think the last thing, well, I talked about that already a little bit with the setting of rules and that story with the red car of my son. But then the other piece here, made a big note, Jim Perry. I hope you guys know who Jim Perry is. Jim and I were texting each other up here, probably not appropriate while you guys were talking, but I was texting with Jim because he couldn't be here tonight. Jim is the REACH coordinator, REACH instructor. I guess I'm not exactly sure what all his titles are, but he's kind of a jack of all trades. I've known Jim since he was a high school kid running track and cross country here, and I scared him one day because I came up behind him with a siren in my car. It just happened to go off and scared the heck out of him, and we've been friends ever since. And I was telling him about, I got a message on my other phone, because I have two phones, from a parent in Stewartville who was a dare kid of mine long ago, worried about her middle school child who's having lots of challenges, anger issues, really doesn't care about school and stuff like that. And I had messaged her and said, do you know Jim Perry? Because that's where I would go first and foremost. What the REACH program does, one of the things, is a lot. I know, thank you, Superintendent Selfers, for being here too. I didn't introduce you earlier, but thank you for being here. It means a lot. But one of the things that hasn't been talked about, and we should talk about it, is there's a questionnaire that is out there, and most social workers and people who do counseling in a lot of schools, people who know this do. It's called the ACEs program, Adverse Childhood Experiences. So you have kids who have grown up in really difficult situations, challenges of all kinds, and it's 10 simple questions that go from, has one of your parents ever been incarcerated, to have you ever been worried that your parents were going to assault you, or someone that cared for you was going to assault you, various questions. And the higher the score, the more likely they are going to have lots of challenges in their life. And the REACH program, and Jim and I, we've talked about this thing for a long time, the ACE program, the ACEs questionnaire. And I know this young boy that's struggling right now has got a lot of check marks in there. And he hasn't been to see Jim, and he's not involved there. And so Jim is he knows exactly who the kid is that I'm talking about, because he says the kid walks by and says hi to him quite frequently. And now we're going to start doing some things, and I hope that we can get this young man who has great potential to become something that I know his mom dreams of, and his grandparents, and so on. So with that, I think I'm going to get to the questions. It is 8:30, sorry, we were there. We were doing so well, and then I started talking. So, do you have questions? If so, I'm going to run around with the mic so that everybody can hear if you have a question. If not, I have another 10 minutes that I can talk about the marijuana bill. So, either it's me or the marijuana bill. Which one do you want to hear about? Questions? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Okay, it's very interesting, and thank you all for presenting this. What I sit here trying to work out is what actually are the risks. I saw some graphs, I've forgotten the names of the people, but about the sex trafficking. We actually had some numbers, and that's what I kind of sit here wanting, is how many people per 10,000 or 100,000, or what the percentage is, that sort of thing, so I can build an assessment in my own mind of what the risk is. I mean, I feel a little bit like, watching Fox or CNN and trying to understand what the risk of COVID was a couple of years ago. There's a lot of talk about things that I do need to understand, need to see, but I can't understand making a risk assessment because I don't have the numbers. I was thinking more about the drugs actually, rather than.
Well, you guys go ahead, I'll jump in too. It's really hard, because we don't know. We don't know all of the students. I mean, there is some surveys that go on. There's the superintendent, do they still do the Minnesota Student Survey? And so there is some information there you can gather. We don't have that available here tonight, but you can look it up. The Minnesota Student Survey, I think it's done in 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, something like that.
Sounds about right.
Yep. And it's been going on for years and years and years, so just look it up, and we can try to find that and put a link in our information.
Trying to work out in my own mind what how using is one thing,
Right.
Is it a problem using it?
Yes, it is.
And all these
It
things,
is, and-
kind of, I want to make that risk assessment.
Yeah, so, what is the risk? How many kids are out there? Well, it's generally a lot more than people think. And to me, it's 10%. So 10 out of 100 kids is a lot. But it's even higher than that. Where you'll see in the Minnesota State Survey, as I remember them, I haven't looked at it in a few years, but you'll see 40 and 50% will say that they've done this or that within the last 30 days, similar to what Andrea was talking about with this presentation that she was going through. So, you guys,
Yeah, I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
seal it real quick, I got it back. My card is up on the table. I actually have downloaded PDFs of each of my counties that I cover, so shoot me an email, I'd be glad to give you that Minnesota Student Survey link. It's real easy to access.
so again, it is. Again, in my world, it's way too many, for sure. Okay, sorry, I couldn't fully answer your question, but I tried. Anything else, folks? Questions?
Can I just add to that?
Yep.
Probably 8 years ago or so, I went to something you guys posted at City Heights for sex trafficking. And the detective at the time named John, and there were two Johns giving the presentation, and they set up a live ping, and they did think they did activities, because it was on a weekend when the Johns should have been home with their families. And they basically had to stop their presentation to deal with all the hits they were giving on this fake thing. And this was like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was a very, I don't know, disgustingly eye-opening experience for me being at that then. So I can only imagine when you're saying the prevalence and how prevalent it is. It's only gotten worse with COVID and
Right.
technology.
So what she's talking about is, and you probably can speak even more into this, but when they say John, it's not John as in John the detective. It's John as in the perpetrator of a crime, basically, is looking to victimize a child. And they can set these up. The problem is, for us in law enforcement, it's time consuming and it takes up, I shouldn't say it draws us away from other things, but we don't have the time to do all of those things. And that's our struggle is, we've got 4 guys working in our office. Of our 97 people in the law enforcement side, we have 4 Joel Johnsons. That's all I have. And they are swamped, just in the narcotics world. We got the violent crime enforcement team. I wish we could have 12 of them, so we could have some focus on some of these other things. So one of our biggest challenges is staffing. I know RPD, Rochester Police Department, is in the same place. It's very difficult. So you want to talk about the,
Yeah, I just
Same
want to
kind of
sum
thing.
up, really what we're talking about here, when you use an anti-trafficking lens and come behind this movement, it's understanding that what drives this is the demand. It's people continuously saying and searching out to harm other people, to purchase those individuals, really, at the end of the day. And so, as much as we can sit and talk about victims and survivors and traffickers who are harming others, the people that drive trafficking from occurring is the people that buy. So the people who are driving this, if you want to stop trafficking, you have to stop the demand. And so you're right, when I go out and talk to kids, I've had kids on my caseload who were sitting in the car and they're getting a reward for meeting their goal, and they're pulling up their phone, and remember I said, car's a great place to have conversations. She was going through her Facebook Messenger. This was a few years ago, they're probably not on Facebook Messenger anymore. But she had over 200 requests to talk to her. And I was astonished, and I do this every day, I have these conversations, and you know what her response was to me? That Andrea, this is normal. This is the experience of youth these days. And I just don't answer them. And this is someone who had gone through all of our content, and protective factors were built in, but don't pretend like those folks who want to harm our children aren't out there, because they certainly are.
and it's the same thing in all those areas. It's the same thing in the narcotics area. If we could just stop people from using, it would be done. It would be easy. But that's the hardest part. All we can focus on is the sales part of it, the trafficking part of it. because that's all the time we have for. And of course, you know, if you go after the user, we don't want to criminalize the user, the addicted person. We don't know how they got there. You know, in Ray's case, the Hicks family, it wasn't intentional. There was mental health. There's other challenges in there, and many of the other speakers we've had, they got there because the son had a knee injury in football in one case, and another one I think was a shoulder injury or something, and another one it was a back, and all of a sudden there was opioids and the painkillers, and they're down the road. And a few years later, they're in and out of treatments, and the parents are doing everything they can, and then they lose their son. In most of those other cases, they've all been sons. We haven't had a situation where a family has come and talked about a daughter. But the same thing, I guess, for our other investigators. If we could stop people from buying the catalytic converters, we wouldn't have catalytic converter thefts. It's all the same. If we can just get on the front end of these things, but that's the hard part. That is the hardest place to be, is to do that.
So in terms for numbers, I think I mentioned I was part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, so online solicitation and stuff like that. Just this week, we were talking about a tip that came in through Discord that RPD took. And RPD got hold of her computer from the school and opened it up. Discord was running on that. There was 467, I don't know why I remember that number, but I do, open Discord chats on her computer. So he just started picking random ones to kind of evaluate. Every single one of them was somebody offered to trade pictures, offered to meet her, offered to, so that's one girl in Rochester, 467 active conversations. You know, I don't know how long she leaves them active, but that's ridiculous. I recently worked a traveler case with a girl, actually with a local victim and a victim in South Dakota. So I got their Snapchats, looked at her Snapchat. She was talking to 17 different guys that she had identified herself as 13. And they were still talking to her. These were the guys I could figure out were adults based on the conversations. There was another couple hundred conversations on Snapchat with them. So there's no shortage of people interested in talking to them.
Man, it just makes me so sad. Okay, other questions? I'm gonna just jump into this. I want to talk about the marijuana bill from our perspective. So Ray and I were at that meeting a few years ago, and they were prophesizing the need for legalizing marijuana, and that it had various reasons for it, but they didn't want to hear about the addiction issue. They didn't want to hear about gateway drug issues. They didn't admit, and would not admit that time, that there was if we legalize it, there would be a greater need for treatment services and other supportive help for our state, because it wasn't a problem. And it was, if we just didn't criminalize it, it would go away and it wouldn't be a problem. However, if you go to other sites, you're looking for information, go to the Rocky Mountain HIDTA report. HIDTA is HIDTA. HIDTA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. Olmsted County is a proud HIDTA county. Unfortunately, we were designated that by the federal government a few years ago. It gives us about $60,000 a year to provide support for the violent crime enforcement team, our narcotics investigations, but that's really all it does. It just tells us that the federal government looks at us here in Olmsted County and says, you have a problem, and here you go. So we tried to express those things that day, and it didn't go very far, and now I'm representing the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, trying to get each committee that the marijuana bill goes through on the House side and the Senate side to realize we have greater problems out there. So what's one of the first things that they did in the marijuana bill that's there is they're taking currently, as of Monday when I was up there, they're probably going to change it and take it from somewhere else. But they've designated now $34 million because they now realize, and remember this, they were saying, we're going to get tax money, and any tax money we're going to get from marijuana is going to take care of those problems. They're now taking $34 million out of the transportation budget for our roads and putting it into the marijuana bill to help support local social services and treatment centers around the state. Because they all know there is a problem. So the transportation lobbyist that's there that works for trucking companies and things like that is saying, so basically you're gonna make our roads less safe and you're trading pot for potholes. And it's so true. So there's one piece that you're not hearing about, they're not talking about, they don't want you to know about. Another thing I'd ask you to do that we are very concerned about in law enforcement is go to the Netflix, next time you have the time, and look up the series. I think it's I can't remember how many parts to it is, but it's on Netflix. It's a documentary called Murder Mountain. It's a real place. It's in Northern California, the really beautiful Northern California area where pot can be grown. Apparently it's the best pot in the United States, grown in Northern California. And you'll see that story and follow that. And that kind of thing is now happening in Oklahoma, who just legalized marijuana a year or two ago. They now have missing people who are the farmers at these legal marijuana farms, and the cartel is coming in and killing them and stealing the marijuana. And that's what was happening in Northern California to beget the documentary called Murder Mountain. But our legislators, quite honestly, I'm not trying to be sarcastic here, but they have said, I heard them say it, they said it sitting right next to me at the table in the Senate committee last week, or on Monday, saying we're doing these things because then those issues won't happen here. I'm sorry, they're just being very blind. Here's the other problem for us, law enforcement, and all of us here, is it's going to be legalized beginning August 1st of this year. And by January 1st of 2024, January 1st of 2024, so 6 months later, it's gonna be full. So in August, what they're gonna do is create these boards. There's 3 different boards, committees, commissions that are gonna oversee marijuana legalization in the state of Minnesota. They are keeping all of that control in St. Paul. They're not giving local counties and cities authority. They're going to sit in St. Paul and say, hey, Stewartville needs a pot shop. We're gonna put one in Stewartville because that would be a great place to do that. We can make some money there, we'll make tax money there, blah, 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 away they go. They're not gonna give Stewartville, the city, an opportunity to say, no, we don't want that here. In Colorado, that is part of their legislation that they passed. And this is something they don't want you to know, folks. 66% of the jurisdictions in Colorado have outlawed marijuana shops in their cities and counties. 66%. The only areas that have not taken those steps to outlaw those shops is in the Denver area, and I believe it's Colorado Springs, the 2 most populated counties and urban areas in that state. But in Minnesota, they're not going to allow that to happen. They don't want it to happen because they see what's going on in Colorado. So they're going to legalize it, start these boards and commissions in the 1st of August. By January 1st, it's going to be legal full-on throughout Minnesota, with the shops popping up all over the place. But then they also have in the bill that says, hey, law enforcement, we know there's going to be some problems on our roads and the potential of impaired drivers is going to be a concern. We're worried about that. So we're going to give you, law enforcement, from August 1st of 2023 until December 31st of 2025 to figure out how you're going to deal with that. But until then, do what you're doing now. But then we also have to, in our office, we have to decommission, retire 2 canines that are drug marijuana trained. They're done as of August 1st or January 1st. And we have to, they're also going to provide money for us to add in what's called drug recognition experts, because there's no way to do a drug test on the side of the road for an impaired driver. There's nothing. All we can do is look at them, make some observations, put them through some field sobriety tests, have a DRE come in and say, yep, this is likely this or this, but we have to have a reason to get to those points. And then it's a blood test or a urine test that we have to compel them to do once we have them under arrest. And then it goes off to BCA to be tested. There's nothing that gives us a limit that says this person is over a certain amount and is illegal or unsafe to drive like we do with alcohol. There's no test out there like that. And they don't care. And we've been asking them, wait a minute, give us a couple of years, let us work on this. Yes, we want to have this. Our courts have to approve it. We can't just say, hey, we're gonna use this sample or this testing process and go to court, and if the judge says, nope, I don't like that one, I want the other one, then that case is thrown out. So it has to be processed through all of this. So yeah, it's gonna take a couple of years, they're right. But in the meantime, it's full speed ahead and no stopping it now. And in every state that has legalized it, not only are they seeing murder mountains up here at various places, as Captain Bromberg mentioned again today, and he said it again yesterday to a couple of groups that we were with and talking about this. Here's the problem, and this is one of the things that actually a guy who is from southeast Minnesota and runs a CBD shop testified on Monday and said, you're gonna run me out of business. You're gonna tax me, I'm gonna try to do this legally, and I'm gonna have to pay all these taxes while the cartel guys are gonna come in, and trust me, Joe can attest to this, we do have Mexican cartels selling drugs here in Olmsted County. They're gonna come in and they're gonna sell it at the price that's cheaper than what the shop is. Who do you suppose they're gonna go buy it from? Not the shop. They're gonna buy it down the street from the drug dealer. That's where it's gonna go, and that's exactly what's happening across the country. To the tune also then, on the other side of it, with our traffic safety piece, every state that's headed has seen an increase in fatalities in our highways. And I told each of these legislative groups, so what you're telling me is that the additional deaths on our highways, whoever that may be, you don't know what it is, what lottery day and what pick you're gonna get, but it could be someone in your family who's gonna be killed by a drug-impaired, marijuana-impaired driver. And each of these states, Colorado's been very consistent, probably the highest in the country, at around 20 to 20, I think the highest was 26% increase in deaths from the time they started in 2013 to the current year. I think last year was 20 or 21% higher number of deaths than what they had in their highways in 2013. And I've said, so that's just simply collateral damage, just because somebody wants to put a foreign substance in their body. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And what I'm asking you to do, they're hearing from us, they're hearing from me, and law enforcement, and a lot of different folks, but they need to hear it from you. That's what they're telling us. Well, the public wants it. Everybody I hear from wants it legalized. They're not hearing from you. They need to hear from you, and they need to hear now, because if they do pass this, it's happening, and they'll make a decision sometime in the middle of May, and it'll be on the road. And here we go. It's in our face. So we need to do some things yet to work on it. I'm not asking any of you to tell me how you feel about it, but if you do have any other questions, I know it may be a little touchy, but go ahead. Yes.
Sheriff, what committee is this?
Well, it's all over. The House side is going through 18 different committees because it touches a whole host of them. Monday it was the Transportation Committee and the Senate side, and then the Public Safety side, both House and Senate have seen it too. The House side is going through 14 different committees, the Senate side is going through 18. So they're all gonna see it, or not all, but most of them are gonna see it because it touches everything. I think next week it's going to the Senate's Commerce Committee because it's commerce, it's business, it's, taxes and all of that. So that committee has to look at it and say, yep, we believe this is gonna work for us. So they all look at different sections of it. Oh, by the way, this bill is 300 pages long. It's deep. It just goes on and on and on and on. And I've got to tell you one last little funny piece. It's funny, but it's also sad. Very sad. I told our staff this today, and so Monday, they're having all this debate, talking about drug recognition experts and the canines and safety on the roads, and the trucking company, the trucking association is there. And then one of the legislators, senators puts up a friendly amendment to the bill, and the author was there. And she said, I would like to offer an amendment to the bill that says, and I'm really sad that this is gonna happen, that the law enforcement's canines are going to be retired. And if an agency or an officer doesn't want that dog, I want that dog to go to a good home. So they put in the bill, it's supposed to be in there because it was approved by that committee unanimously, that if a law enforcement agency is gonna retire a canine, a police canine who is trained to sniff marijuana because they can't differentiate, they just smell a smell and go, whoa, it's here, boss. And that dog is done. No matter how old they are, doesn't matter. We've got 2 dogs, both are actually a little bit older in their period of time, so they're not far away from regular retirement. But when this passes, they're done. And they were concerned that these dogs would be just put out on the street or, I don't know, euthanized. They didn't say that, but they wanted to make sure they went to a good home. The comical piece of this is these are police canines that are high-strung, very, very highly trained. They don't just go to your regular home down the street that wants a nice puppy. It's not gonna work that way. So again, they need to hear from you. They need to hear from us, they need to hear from everybody. So if you don't know who your legislators are, it's easy to find them. Just Google it up and go after it because it's gonna be here and it's not gonna be our choice. And we at the local level here in counties and cities are not gonna have a choice. And there's much more to it I can talk about all night long because it's, as I said, 300 pages. So with that, unless there's a burning question, yes, sir? They're going to, well, it's 2 parts to it. They're going to put it in motion August 1st of this year, and what that's going to do is going to set up these boards to start figuring out how they're going to license it and do all those things according to the statute. But then, as I understand it, it's going full on January 1st of 2024. So, and once it goes past May and it's in the law, we heard the governor already say he's signing it. And I don't think he cares what form it's in, he's signing it when it gets through the House and the Senate. And it's on its way. Yeah, the stores are supposed to only be able to sell it. That's the legal way in Minnesota. But Joe will tell you that the record across the country is that the cartels come in like gangbusters. Well, here's you'll get this. This will be interesting. You're all going to understand this. So this is a question I threw to the Public Safety Committee in the Senate 2 weeks ago. One part of the bill, so they take pieces of other statutes that already exist. So marijuana is illegal in Minnesota now. So they take that and they move things around and they cut and they paste it and they put it in different places. I'll see if I can describe this properly. They reduced the amount, or I'm sorry, they increased the amounts. So the amount of what a person can have on their person now is going to be much more later on. So it's not a felony unless you have 5 pounds of marijuana in your house. It's not a felony until, in this new bill, until you have 5 pounds of marijuana in your house. Does anybody here know how much 5 pounds of marijuana looks like? That's a lot of marijuana. I think there's one guy here that does. That's a lot of marijuana. That's not personal use marijuana. What are you going to do? It's organic. It dies. It goes away. It's like lettuce, folks. You can't keep it forever. Why would you want 5 pounds? And then the other thing that they did is they said, it's a gross misdemeanor only if you sell or you possess 2 ounces in a school zone, a park zone, I can't remember, there's like 4 different areas, but I know it's school and park zone. So I said, so you're telling me, Senator, that a kid can come to school and have an ounce of marijuana, ounce and a half of marijuana, and he's not going to get charged with anything in a school zone? Shouldn't this be a zero tolerance? Why are we allowing this? They haven't changed that part of the bill. I mean, there's nobody in that room that day that should have agreed to say that, well, that's okay. but they all did, they passed it without fail, boom, gone. Actually, they passed it on party lines, 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans, it went on to the next committee. So all it takes is one committee to stop these bills, it's over on either side. But right now, it's passing on party lines because the House in Minnesota is, I can't remember what the number, but it's just barely over the Democrats. They have more votes, and the same thing on the Senate side. So the reason it hasn't passed in previous years was the Senate had more Republicans, I think by 1 or 2, and it flipped in this last